The first rays of sunlight streamed through the boat's windows, gently rousing me from my sleep. I blearily opened my eyes, disoriented for a moment before remembering the events of the previous night. Sitting up, I stretched and rubbed my eyes, trying to shake off the lingering grogginess. As I took in my surroundings, I realized that it was early morning. The peacefulness of Jellyfish Fields mirrored the stillness in my mind, a stark contrast to the chaos of the Krusty Krab. A sense of relief washed over me as the events of the previous night came back to mind. I was grateful that I had managed to escape the hash-slinging Slasher's grasp and make it out of the Krusty Krab alive. As I sat in the boat, watching the sun slowly rise higher in the sky, I couldn't help but feel a mixture of exhaustion and triumph. The nightmare was over, and a new day was beginning. Despite the harrowing experience faced at the Krusty Krab, I couldn't deny that I still loved the SpongeBob SquarePants TV show and the iconic restaurant. After all, this was just a horrific adaptation with a terrifying twist. Sitting in the boat, surrounded by the peacefulness of Jellyfish Fields, I found solace in the realization that this experience didn't dampen my affection for the SpongeBob universe. After waking up in the boat and taking in the peaceful surroundings, I decided to have a makeshift breakfast. Remembering the leftover Krabby Patties packed in a container, I grabbed them and savored each bite. The familiar taste of the Krabby Patties brought a small sense of normalcy back to me, reminding me of the carefree days spent watching SpongeBob and hanging out in the real Krusty Krab. As I finished the Krabby Patties, I took a moment to bask in the warm golden sunlight. The peaceful ambiance of Jellyfish Fields provided a stark contrast to the chaos of the night before, and I found myself appreciating the simplicity of the moment. Now that I had some food in my stomach, I pondered about what to do next. There was still much more of this world to explore, but maybe a little more rest would be good. While I was contemplating my next move, my attention was suddenly drawn to the scene outside the boat. In the distance, I noticed SpongeBob and Patrick gleefully engaging in their iconic activity, jellyfishing. A small smile tugged at the corners of my mouth as I watched the two friends, their carefree banter and laughter reaching my ears even from afar. Unable to resist the allure of joining SpongeBob and Patrick's jellyfishing adventure, I swiftly hopped out of the boat and made my way to where the two friends were already immersed in the activity. Approaching SpongeBob and Patrick, I called out to them with a cheerful wave. "Hey! Don't mind if I join in on the jellyfishing fun?" SpongeBob and Patrick looked up, each sporting their signature grins. SpongeBob greeted me excitedly, waving his net high in the air. "Fexa! Sure thing. More jellyfishing friends, the better." Patrick chimed in with a friendly nod. "Yeah, the more the merrier." I chuckled at their infectious enthusiasm, feeling right at home in their carefree company. I grabbed a spare net nearby and prepared to join the duo in their quest for catching the elusive jellyfishes. With the nets in hand, the three of us waded into the shallow waters, scouring the area for any signs of moving tentacles or quivering jelly shapes beneath the water surface. As we ventured further out into the water, SpongeBob and Patrick chattered and joked, their carefree banter providing an enjoyable backdrop to our jellyfishing adventure. While the two friends shared their witty banter, I tried to focus on the task at hand, spotting the elusive jellyfish. However, it was hard not to be distracted by their antics, and a few chuckles escaped me every now and then. As I scanned the waters meticulously, my eyes suddenly caught sight of a school of jellyfish not too far away. Seeing the opportunity, I quickly tapped SpongeBob and Patrick on the shoulders. I pointed at the direction of the jellyfish. "Over there, guys! There's a whole bunch of jellyfish!" SpongeBob and Patrick immediately turned their attention to the pointed direction, their eyes widening in excitement at the sight of the jellies. With determined grins, SpongeBob and Patrick held up their nets, ready to catch the jellyfish. SpongeBob looked at me, a gleam in his eye. "You ready, Fexa? Let's get some jelly!" I mirrored their grins and gripped my net firmly, preparing for the jellyfishing challenge ahead. "Ready as I'll ever be, guys! Let's do this!" With all of us pumped up and ready, we began our assault on the group of jellyfish, swiping our nets skillfully through the water, trying to ensnare the slippery creatures. The jellyfish proved to be elusive targets, quickly darting and swirling around their watery domain. SpongeBob and Patrick both had their moments of close calls, narrowly missing a few swift jellies. I, on the other hand, managed to land a jellyfish or two, my net sweeping through the water like an expert fisherman. As we continued our quest to catch the jellyfish, our competitive spirits kicked in, each of us eager to emerge as the best jellyfisher. SpongeBob and Patrick didn't hesitate to playfully taunt each other and me for their missed catches, adding a layer of friendly rivalry to the scene. I joined in on the banter, teasing SpongeBob and Patrick in return when they missed an opportunity to catch a jellyfish. Our laughter filled the air, creating a carefree atmosphere despite the ongoing competition. Time flew by as we immersed ourselves in the task of jellyfishing. 2 hours passed like a flash, filled with laughter, playful banter, and a healthy dose of competition. By the time we completed our jellyfishing adventure, our nets were full of different types and sizes of jellyfish, glistening in the sunlight. With a sense of satisfaction, we watched as the last of the jellyfish were released back into the sea. They swam gracefully away, their translucent bodies swaying through the water like shimmering apparitions. Panting slightly from our efforts, SpongeBob, Patrick, and I stood there, a sense of accomplishment on all of our faces. I let out a satisfied sigh, admiring the scene before us. As the jellyfish swam away and we admired the aftermath of our jellyfishing adventure, my mind suddenly recalled a scene from the show. In an episode, SpongeBob had placed jellyfish jelly on his Krabby Patty, giving the sandwich a unique and unexpected twist. Curiosity piqued, I found myself contemplating the idea of trying the unusual combination for myself. I looked at SpongeBob and Patrick, a playful gleam in my eye. A thought popped into my head and I couldn't resist sharing it with the friends who had accompanied me in the jellyfishing fun. Hey, SpongeBob, I just remembered the episode where you put jellyfish jelly on your Krabby Patty. Can I try that too? SpongeBob's face lit up at the mention of the episode and he chuckled at the memory. Oh yeah, that was a crazy one. Sure, you can try it if you want. Patrick chimed in, curious and slightly grossed out at the same time. Are you sure? It was pretty weird when SpongeBob did it. I chuckled at Patrick's skepticism, undeterred by his reaction. The idea of experiencing this odd food pairing intrigued me. Oh, come on, Patrick, it can't be that bad, right? I'm curious to see how it tastes. SpongeBob encouraged me with a grin. Yeah, go for it. It might just surprise you. With SpongeBob's support, I decided to take the plunge. There was only one way to find out if jellyfish jelly on a Krabby Patty was truly a taste sensation or a culinary disaster. As we all settled down in a comfortable spot, I took a Krabby Patty in one hand and retrieved a jar of jellyfish jelly. I carefully added a small amount of the jelly onto the burger and held it up to observe the odd combination. Patrick watched me with a mixture of curiosity and mild disgust, while SpongeBob looked on with anticipation. With my jellyfish jelly-infused Krabby Patty in hand, I took a deep breath and prepared to take a bite. The moment of truth was finally upon me, and I was both excited and nervous about what I was about to taste. I carefully took a bite of the jellyfish jelly-covered Krabby Patty, feeling the jelly's cool, slippery texture contrast with the warm, delicious burger. As I chewed, the flavors mingled together, creating an unusual yet strangely delicious taste. My eyes widened in surprise, and a satisfied smile formed on my face. Wow, that's actually pretty good! Patrick raised an eyebrow as he saw my reaction, still skeptical about the whole idea. Really? You mean you actually like it? SpongeBob chuckled at Patrick's disbelief. He had a knowing look on his face, as if he knew all along how surprisingly tasty the combination could be. I nodded, taking another bite of the jellyfish jelly-topped Krabby Patty. The sweet and slightly tangy flavor of the jellyfish jelly complemented the savory taste of the burger, creating a unique combination that was oddly satisfying. With each bite, I found myself enjoying the strange pairing even more. It was a bold culinary experiment, one that surprisingly worked. As I finished the last bit of the jellyfish jelly-topped Krabby Patty, I let out a satisfied sigh. That was surprisingly delicious. Who would have thought that jellyfish jelly and a Krabby Patty would go so well together? SpongeBob chuckled, his expression a mix of triumph and amusement. Told you it was good. Having spent a fun-filled afternoon jellyfishing with SpongeBob and Patrick, I bid farewell to my friends and made my way over to Mr. Krabs' house. I had decided to pay a visit to the grumpy yet lovable Crab, curious to see how he was doing. Approaching his house, I rapped on the door with a firm knock. A few moments passed before the door creaked open, revealing Mr. Krabs' small, crabby visage. Krabs looked at me, his eyes narrowing slightly as he recognized me. He let out a gruff sigh before speaking. "Ahoy, Fexa. What brings you to me doorstep?" I gave him a warm smile, undeterred by his gruff exterior. "Hey, Mr. Krabs, just thought I'd drop by and say hi." "Hope I'm not interrupting anything." Mr. Krabs grumbled, but opened the door wider to let me in. "Aye, come on in, lass. You ain't interrupting." I stepped into his cozy, nautical-themed living room and settled onto a nearby chair. Mr. Krabs settled down across from me, regarding me with a mix of annoyance and curiosity in his beady eyes. Mr. Krabs crossed his arms, his frown deepening slightly. "So what brings ye here, lass? Not that I don't enjoy yer company, but ye ain't one to just drop by unannounced." I chuckled softly at his directness. "Ah, you caught me. I actually had something on my mind, and I thought you might be the right crab to ask." Mr. Krabs raised an eyebrow, his curiosity piqued. "Oh, is that so? What is it ye want to ask me?" I leaned forward, eyes growing serious as I began to share the horrifying tale about the hash-slinging slasher. "Mr. Krabs, I had a terrifying encounter last night, and I thought you should know about it. I was out in the open sea, heading back to Jellyfish Fields, when I encountered this nightmarish entity." I began recounting the horrifying tale of the hash-slinging slasher, my voice slightly hushed as I spoke of the menacing entity who had terrorized me the previous night. Mr. Krabs listened intently, his expression a mix of astonishment and disbelief at the story unfolding before him. He rubbed his chin contemplatively as I finished relaying the experience. Mr. Krabs' crabby expression darkened as I recounted the events, his brows furrowing with concern and curiosity. I've heard whispers about that blasted slasher." "What happened, lass?" "The restaurant was dark and eerie. I went inside thinking I'd check the place out, when suddenly..." Mr. Krabs leaned forward, his beady eyes fixated on me, fully engaged in my story now. "What was it, lass? What happened next?" "As I was walking through the restaurant, I suddenly saw this towering, shadowy figure emerge from the kitchen. It was the hash-slinging slasher." My voice trembled slightly as I recalled the monstrous being before me, the memory still fresh and haunting in my mind. Mr. Krabs' expression twisted into a mixture of shock and disbelief. He grumbled under his breath, clearly shaken by the tale. "Holy barnacles, lass! Ye saw the slasher in me own establishment?" I nodded, visibly shaken. "Yes, Mr. Krabs. It was there. And it..." My voice trailed off as I remembered the slasher's menacing approach, the way its ghostly aura seemed to fill the air with dread and terror. "Go on, lass. What happened next?" Krabs urged me to continue, his crabby expression tense with both fear and anticipation. I swallowed, gathering my courage to continue the tale. The slasher spotted me and started coming towards me. It had these glowing, eerie eyes, and it dragged a giant, rusty meat cleaver. I was frozen, petrified with fear, and just as it was about to attack, Mr. Krabs leaned in closer, his beady eyes wide as he hung on to every word. "What happened then, lass? You can't just leave me hanging like that." I bolted. I ran out of the Krusty Krab as fast as I could, not daring to look back. I could feel its eyes boring into my back and the sound of that cleaver scraping against the floor. I shuddered as I recounted the horrifying escape, the memory still sending chills down my spine. Mr. Krabs sat there, stunned into silence for a moment, processing the tale I had just told him. "Lass, that is downright dreadful. The hash-slashing slasher in me own Krusty Krab. It's enough to give a Krusty Krab like me a heart attack." I nodded, my expression still one of visible fear and discomfort. "Yes, Mr. Krabs, it was the scariest thing I've ever experienced. I thought you should know, especially considering it happened in your restaurant." Mr. Krabs grumbled, visibly shaken by the tale. I appreciate ye telling me about it, lass. I'll be sure to keep an eye out for any suspicious shenanigans." He paused for a moment, then let out a defeated sigh. "And I suppose I should stay away from me own restaurant after nightfall, just to be safe." "Actually, Mr. Krabs, there's something else you should know. I did some research, and I discovered that the hash-slinging slasher only comes back to the Krusty Krab at 3 in the morning on Tuesdays." Mr. Krabs raised an eyebrow, his expression turning into one of confused skepticism. 3 in the morning on a Tuesday, you say? Blast, what kind of strange, time-specific haunting is that?" I nodded in agreement. equally baffled by the bizarre specificity of the slasher's visits to the Krusty Krab. I know it's such a weird pattern. Why only on Tuesdays, and why specifically at 3 a.m.? And why is it only coming after me restaurant, and not anywhere else in town? Mr. Krabs scratched his crabby chin idly, his brow furrowed in thought. I shrugged, my expression mirroring his confusion. I have no idea, Mr. Krabs. It's like the slasher has some kind of grudge against your restaurant. Or maybe it's attracted to the Krusty Krab for some strange reason. Either way, it's pretty unsettling. I nodded, recalling the peculiar stories I had come across during my research. Actually, there are a few unusual legends surrounding the slasher. One theory is that the slasher cut off his own hand during a cooking accident and replaced it with a spatula. I paused for a moment, then added, another theory is that the slasher was allegedly fired at his own funeral, which led to his vengeful spirit haunting the Krusty Krab on Tuesdays. Mr. Krabs grumbled, listening to the bizarre theories. Aye, those tales are downright bonkers. But it still doesn't explain why the slasher only comes after me restaurant, and only on Tuesdays at that blasted time. It's like the curse is specifically targeted at the Krusty Krab. I paused for a moment, mulling over the information I had stumbled upon during my research. You know, Mr. Krabs, there's another interesting theory I came across. Some people say the hash-slinging slasher used to work at the Krusty Krab as a fry cook, way before you took over, and when you became the owner and hired SpongeBob. The slasher apparently got upset and now haunts the place on Tuesdays. Mr. Krabs' eyebrows shot up in surprise at this revelation. He grumbled under his breath, seemingly contemplating the possibility. Blasted spatula hand, former fry cook? Could it be true that the slasher used to work at me restaurant, and he's haunting the place because I hired SpongeBob instead of him? I nodded, recalling the final theory I had discovered. Yes, I also read about another theory. Supposedly, before you took over the Krusty Krab, the previous owner fired the hash-slinging slasher at his own funeral. Since then, the slasher has been haunting the Krusty Krab, seeking revenge on Tuesday nights. Mr. Krabs scowled, his crabby features twisting into a mix of annoyance and disbelief. This gets stranger by the minute. Fired at his own funeral, you say? That's the wackiest tale yet? He sighed, leaning back in his chair. But I suppose it wouldn't hurt to keep a closer eye on the restaurant on Tuesdays, just in case all this spooky nonsense has an ounce of truth to it. I smiled, relieved that Mr. Krabs was taking the threat seriously, despite the outlandish theories. Yes, it's better to be safe than sorry. Even if these legends are just tall tales, it still wouldn't hurt to stay vigilant, especially on Tuesdays at 3 a.m. Mr. Krabs grumbled, scratching his head. You're probably right, lass. Better safe than sorry. I'll keep a close eye on me restaurant on Tuesday nights, just in case that spatula-wielding ghost comes lurking around. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small pouch of my favorite treat, chocolate gold coins. Hey, Mr. Krabs, have you ever tried these? I offered the pouch towards him, holding up one of the gleaming chocolate. Mr. Krabs' eyes widened at the sight of the treats. Despite his usual stern demeanor, his sweet tooth couldn't resist the allure of chocolate. He hesitated, but his curiosity got the better of him. Well, I ain't usually one for sweets, lass, but those there chocolate coins do look mighty tempting. I chuckled, seeing his resistance fading as he stared at the shiny treats. Go on, Mr. Krabs, have one. They're delicious. I handed the pouch to him, watching as he picked up one of the chocolate coins and examined it in his crab claws. Mr. Krabs studied the chocolate coin for a moment, as if weighing the decision of whether or not to indulge. But ultimately, his sweet tooth won out. Well, just a nibble, mind you. Can't be letting a crusty old crab like myself get too indulgent with sweets. He popped the chocolate coin into his mouth and bit into it, his face instantly lighting up with pleasure. I smiled, watching as Mr. Krabs' expression softened with pleasure. Clearly, he was enjoying the treat more than he had expected. See? Pretty good, isn't it? Mr. Krabs nodded, a hint of a smile on his crabby face. I gotta admit, lass, these here chocolate coins are tastier than I'd care to admit. He took another small bite, savoring the taste. Where'd ya get these from, if ya don't mind me asking? I chuckled, delighted that he was enjoying the treat. Oh, I have a few secret sources for these little treasures. I make sure to stock up whenever I can. They're my favorite snack, especially during those late nights at the jellyfish fields. Mr. Krabs grunted, his expression growing more interested as I mentioned the jellyfish fields. Late nights at the jellyfish fields, yes, eh? What got going on up there that keeps out so late? I chuckled, realizing that Mr. Krabs was curious about my nightly activities. Oh, I just enjoy the peace and quiet of the jellyfish fields at night. Sometimes I go there to clear my head, or I just like to watch the jellyfish floating in the water. They're quite mesmerizing, especially under the moonlight. Mr. Krabs raised an eyebrow, his crabby expression somewhat skeptical. Yeah, go to the jellyfish fields at night, just to watch them slimy critters floating about? Sounds a bit boring, don't you think, lass? I laughed softly, appreciating Mr. Krabs' bluntness. I suppose it might sound dull to some, but I find a strange sort of tranquility in observing the jellyfish. Their peaceful, almost magical movement in the water has a certain calming effect on me. It's like they're a reminder of the beauty and wonder of the ocean, even in the darkness of the night. Plus, it's a great way to unwind after a long day. I smiled at Mr. Krabs, feeling a sense of camaraderie after our conversation. I better get going now, Mr. Krabs. Thanks for hearing me out and for indulging in a chocolate coin. I held up the now empty pouch with a soft chuckle. Mr. Krabs grumbled, his crabby expression returning to its usual stoic state. He raised a claw in farewell. Aye, off ye go, lass. And remember, if that hash-slinging slasher comes back on Tuesday nights, let me know. Here? I nodded, my expression becoming more serious for a moment. Of course, Mr. Krabs. I'll keep an eye out and let you know if I see anything suspicious. Stay safe, all right? Mr. Krabs grunted in acknowledgement, his expression showing he was still slightly unnerved by the thought of the hash-slinging slasher. Aye, I will. And lass, just be careful out there. There's no tellin' what other strange creatures ye might encounter in them seas. I chuckled, a hint of amusement in my voice. Don't worry, Mr. Krabs, I can take care of myself. But thanks for the concern. I gave him a final wave and headed for the exit. I threw a final glance over my shoulder at Mr. Krabs. And hey, I'm a pretty tough pirate fox, you know? I've seen my fair share of sea creatures out there. A spatula-wielding ghost ain't gonna get the better of me. Mr. Krabs grumbled, his crabby expression betraying a hint of admiration for my bravery. I suppose a scrappy pirate fox like yourself isn't afraid of much. Just remember, if ye ever need a place to hide, me restaurant's always open. I smiled at his unexpected gesture of support. Thanks, Mr. Krabs. I'll keep that in mind. And if I ever come across any more mysterious legends, I'll be sure to share them with you. As I left Mr. Krabs' house and stepped out into the cool night air, I couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. I had managed to warn Mr. Krabs about the hash-slinging slasher, and even shared some of my favorite treats with him. A smile tugged at the corners of my muzzle as I walked along the quiet streets of Bikini Bottom, proud of my bravery and friendship with the crusty old crab. I pulled out my phone and glanced at the time, my smile fading slightly as I saw that it was already 1 p.m. It was time for me to say farewell to Bikini Bottom and return back to the mainland. With a tinge of regret, I took one last look at the charming undersea city, the colorful lights and sights of my temporary home. Taking a deep breath, I turned towards the horizon, ready to begin my journey back to dry land. I walked through the familiar streets of Bikini Bottom, feeling a pang of nostalgia as I passed by the famous locations that had become so familiar to me. I eventually made my way back to the spot where I had first arrived, my ship still sitting in the sandy shores, patiently waiting for my return. As I approached the ship, I couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions. That part of me wanted to stay a bit longer in this wonderful underwater city, but I knew my true home awaited me on the mainland. I climbed onto my ship, the familiar smell of the salty sea air filling my nostrils as I made my way to the steering wheel. With a practiced ease, I grasped the wheel in my clawed hands and took a moment to look out at the tranquil waters surrounding Bikini Bottom. Saying goodbye to this colorful underwater world was hard, but I knew I had a long journey ahead. I took a deep breath and started the ship's engine, preparing to set sail back to the mainland. I pushed the lever next to the steering wheel, watching as the ship gradually pivoted upwards, its prow aimed towards the surface of the water. The ship began to ascend slowly, making its way up to the surface with a steady, rhythmic motion. I held on to the steering wheel, the sea breeze blowing through my fur as the ship continued its ascent. As we broke through the surface of the ocean, I took a deep breath of the fresh air, and glanced upwards at the vast expanse of the sky above. With the ship now resurfaced, I took hold of the steering wheel and turned it west, guiding the ship towards the mainland. The ocean stretched out in all directions as I navigated the ship through the waves, the sunlight glinting off the water's surface. As I sailed closer to the mainland, I could see the distant shoreline becoming clearer. The sight filled me with a mix of excitement and a tinge of sadness, knowing that I was leaving the undersea wonders of Bikini Bottom behind me for now. As I navigated the ship back to the mainland, the emotions stirred within me. Despite the excitement of returning to my home on land, I couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness at leaving behind the charming undersea city of Bikini Bottom. The friendly faces of the sea creatures I had befriended flashed through my mind, and I couldn't help but feel a pang of longing for the vibrant, colorful world beneath the surface. I gripped the wheel a little tighter, silently bidding farewell to my temporary home in the depths. As the ship continued its journey towards the mainland, the intensity of my sadness grew stronger and stronger. I found myself cringing internally, the thought of leaving Bikini Bottom behind becoming harder and harder to bear. I tried to push the emotion aside, focusing on steering the ship and navigating the waves. But every time I thought of my friends back in the underwater city, the sadness threatened to overwhelm me once again. My hands clenched around the steering wheel, my claws digging into the smooth wood as my sadness and cringe intensified. Trying to hold it all in, I clenched my teeth tightly, the tension palpable in every muscle of my body. The ship cruised through the waves, inching closer and closer to the mainland. But my thoughts remained firmly anchored to the vibrancy of Bikini Bottom. Unable to hold back any longer, the tears began to flow, streaming down my face in salty streams. The sight of the mainland growing closer only served to deepen the sadness I felt at leaving my temporary home behind, and I couldn't stop the flood of emotions breaking through. The ship continued to sail forward, each wave bringing us closer to the shoreline, but all I could do was sob, the weight of leaving Bikini Bottom behind feeling heavier with each passing moment. The weight of sadness became too much to bear, and I dropped to my knees, my body shaking with the force of my uncontrollable sobs. The tears streamed down my cheeks and I cried loudly, the sound of my anguish carried off by the wind. My grip on the steering wheel loosened, the ship continuing forward under its own momentum while I knelt on the deck, unable to do anything but cry. The pain of leaving Bikini Bottom behind became almost unbearable as I knelt on the deck, my hands covering my face in a futile attempt to stop the tears. But no matter how hard I tried, the sobs continued to rack my body, my cries growing louder and more heartbreaking with each passing moment. It was several long minutes before I finally managed to regain some semblance of composure, my chest heaving and my eyes red and puffy from crying. After what felt like an eternity, I managed to bring my crying under control. My breathing slowed, and I reached for a bucket of fresh seawater nearby. With trembling hands, I splashed some of the water onto my face, hoping it would soothe my reddened eyes and swollen cheeks. The cold water helped to bring me back to my senses, the sound of the waves and the fresh sea air helping to ease some of the emotional turmoil I'd just experienced. With the ship now in the docks, I dropped the anchor, securing the vessel in place. The familiar surroundings of the mainland loomed before me, the hustle and bustle of dry land a stark contrast to the tranquil waters of Bikini Bottom. I let out a deep sigh, my heart still heavy with the sadness of leaving the undersea city behind. I looked back towards the horizon, a hint of longing in my eyes as I silently bid farewell to my friends and the colorful world beneath the waves. I pulled into the driveway, the familiar side of my home, providing a comforting sense of familiarity after my time in Bikini Bottom. The house looked warm and welcoming, a stark contrast to the underwater environment I had just left behind. With a sigh, I turned off the engine and climbed out of the car. My mind was still filled with thoughts of my time in the undersea city, but I knew I had to focus on my life on land once more. I headed inside, the sounds of my footsteps echoing through the quiet house. As I made my way upstairs to the bathroom, I decided to take a shower, hoping the warm water would help soothe my weary body and weary mind. I stepped into the shower, turning on the faucet and letting the steaming water rain down upon me. The soothing sensation washed over me, providing a moment of respite from the emotional turmoil of leaving Bikini Bottom behind. Feeling somewhat drained, both physically and emotionally, I headed towards my car, which was parked nearby. The familiar sight of the vehicle provided a small sense of comfort as I unlocked the door and slid into the driver's seat. I took a moment to rest, letting out a deep breath and gathering my thoughts. Part of me yearned to return to the undersea city, to the vibrant colors and friendly sea creatures I had grown fond of, but for now I had to focus on my life on land. As I drove home, my mind began to wander, thoughts of the future taking shape in my mind. I thought about my boyfriend Gohan and my brother Foxy, two of the most important people in my life. A small smile tugged at the corners of my lips as I considered the idea of introducing them to the wonders of Bikini Bottom. Imagining their reactions to the colorful city and its quirky inhabitants made me feel a sense of excitement. It would be a unique and unforgettable experience for them, just as it had been for me. After I had finished my shower and dried myself off, I climbed into bed, the softness of the sheets a welcoming embrace after my long journey. As I lay there, my mind continued to race with thoughts of Bikini Bottom. A small smile tugged at the corners of my mouth as I reflected on my time in the undersea city. It had been an incredible experience, like stepping into the world of my favorite childhood TV show. Despite the sadness I felt at leaving, I was grateful for the adventure I had just experienced. As I lay there in bed, my mind began to imagine the possibilities of bringing my beloved boyfriend and my brother to experience the wonders of Bikini Bottom. A sense of excitement filled my heart at the idea of sharing the vibrant city with them, showing them the colorful sights and introducing them to the quirky sea creatures. I smiled to myself, the mental image of their reactions fueling my anticipation and eagerness to return and bring them along on the adventure.